Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another TLDR video. I am your host, Voodoo Pickles, and today we're going to be talking about Cold Front. So this is a reprint of Cold Front by Barry Hammond that was just released by Fathom Press, and I first heard about this book from a different YouTuber. Hopefully, if I can remember their channel name, I'll be able to put that down in the description below so you guys can check them out as well. And this is a very interesting book. I had just a little bit on the back of it that I was able to like kind of pick the book up. So with this book, we follow three men. So these three men are Jimmy, John, and Ken. And they are in Canada. And in Canada, what they are doing is they're working like on some oil rigs or something, some type of rigging process thing. At the beginning of the book, we're following these three men. They are getting drunk in a bar, and it's kind of their usual thing they do. They hang out, they get drunk, they go back to work. So while they're drinking, we kind of get to learn a little bit about them. Jimmy is a Native American who drinks a lot and is super happy like all the time until somebody who is not a friend says something derogatory towards him where he gets super pissed off and just kind of hulks out on them. Johnny is a Ukrainian man who likes to argue and likes to argue in a way that he does not know how to argue. He's one of those people who will yell at you louder and louder and louder as a way of getting his point across instead of actually making points and stuff like that. Ken is a Frenchman who also likes to argue, but is also like feels like he's smarter than the rest of them. So at the beginning, we're following them. They're drinking, they're hanging out, they're arguing. Well, Ken and Johnny are arguing, and they're just hanging out, and then they run out of some money, and they're like, all right, well, it's not payday yet. Maybe we'll talk to Arv. Arv is the guy who is like their boss. He is like, all right, I'm going to, they're like, we'll just go ask him for money, like $20 to get us a couple of cases of beer, and we'll be good to go. They go to ask Arv for money, and Arv's just like, get the fuck out of here with this noise. Payday's not until tomorrow, or not until Friday, or whatever the day is. I'm not giving you money. And he calls Jimmy like an engine or something. He's like, take that engine and get the hell out of here. Jimmy gets upset. Jimmy grabs a bottle and that he like keeps in his pocket, and then hits Arv across the head. They attack Arv, and they're all getting more and more angry as this whole situation goes on, and they take that anger out on Arv. And they think that they killed him, and they're like, well, we killed him, so what are we gonna do? We're gonna take the money from the payroll, and then we're gonna go get rid of Arv, and then we're going to take the money in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. We're just gonna be like, we quit. We're done. Nobody's going to find Arv. It's the Canadian winter. Like, they're not going to find him till spring. It'll be fine. So that's their plan. That is their whole plan. Ken is the only one with the vehicle. They take Arv, they put him in the vehicle, they put him in the trunk, and they start going. It's like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning in Canada, and it's starting to snow. And so they're going down the road. Ken can't see where he's going. They're all super drunk, and they're all kind of just passing out. Like, Jimmy's the first one. As soon as he gets in there, he passes out. Johnny is, as soon as they stop a little or something, he's just like, all right, I'm out. I'm gone. And Ken stops the vehicle, and he's like, this should be far enough, right? This should be far enough. Maybe a little bit further, but this will do. I don't know. I'll check after. And then they all fall asleep, and then they wake up. They are all in the middle of a field. Ken is the last one to wake up. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, what happened. How did Ken get them out into the middle of nowhere, into a field? There's no tracks, no nothing. And they're like, well, what do we do? And they look in the trunk, and Arv is gone. So they start freaking out, like, where did Arv go? What happened? And nobody knows. So they start walking. They're like, we have to get back to town. We have to get back to town. It's cold. We're not dressed. We're not equipped for this. And so they start walking, and they end up finding Arv. Arv is like just about, so he's skinned. He's skinned. He's up in some trees, and the only way they can tell it's him is by the sweater he was wearing when they killed him, or they thought they killed him, and he's that sweater's up there, and so they start freaking out a little bit, and they start going a little bit faster, and then they get to a little cabin in the middle of the woods, and they go into the cabin. They go into the cabin. They try and figure out who lives here, what's going on. They don't find anybody in there, and so they start looking around, digging in all of the things for the people who live in this cabin, and they find food and everything. Jimmy finds a record player, and he's just really happy that there's a record player, and they start trying to find some food, warm up. They make a fire, and while they're doing this, they hear something down in the cellar, and there is a trapdoor, and they go into the trapdoor. They try and figure out who's down there, and Johnny goes down there with the shotgun that Ken had in his car, and that's the only type of protection that they have. So Johnny starts going down there, and then somebody grabs his ankles from the stairs and pulls, and so he falls down. Ken goes down there. Everybody's just like, oh no, there's something down here. And they find a woman who has super white skin. She has blonde, almost white hair, and she's just wearing a bathrobe. And they get her upstairs, and Ken sees her, and Ken's just like, wow, she's super hot. I would really like to smash that. And he's just like, you know what? I already done the murder. Some essay probably wouldn't be too outside of the realm of possibilities. He recognizes her from a picture that's in the cabin with her and her husband and a child, a daughter. So he's like, I'm pretty sure this is her in here. So he's like, maybe I could use a shotgun and kill the husband if he comes back, essay her, and they can leave in the morning. Like that's kind of what he's trying to formulate his plan with. Johnny and Jimmy are kind of freaking out. Jimmy's still just kind of distracted by the record player. Anyways, they're in this cabin with her, and they're trying to ask her questions of what's going on, what happened. Johnny is super aggressive towards her because she did, trip him on the way down the stairs. And he tries to confront her and get angry and up in her face because that's his personality. And she bites him. She bites him on the stomach, and so he finally gets her off of him. And so Ken's stepping up for her. He's like, don't hurt her. Don't touch her. Don't be mean to her. And Johnny's just like fed up with her and this whole place. He's like, we need to leave or anything. He's like, we can't just leave her here. And so the only way that they're able to kind of calm down is Ken ties her up. And they try and feed her some of the beans and hot dogs that they're making, except it's not really good. She's not really eating anything. They tie her up to a trunk, and they all decide, all right, we ate. We're just going to try and go to sleep. We're going to try and go to sleep. They've been drinking as well because they found a box of alcohol that was in this cabin. So they've been drinking steadily, and they all decide they're going to go to sleep. So when they're going to sleep, I think Jimmy is the first one to wake up. He wakes up because he has to go. He has to pee. So he goes outside, and there's the bathroom in the cabin, but it's all messed up. Jimmy has to go pee. So when he decides he needs to go pee, he's like, all right, I really need to go. And he's like, I'm not going to use the bathroom because it's disgusting. It's gross. I can't breathe in there. So I'm going to go outside. And so he goes outside of the cabin, and he's like, all right, I'm not going to go too far because just nobody cares. So he pees outside of the cabin, and then he hears a noise, and it sounds like a bell. And so he's going to go to investigate what the sound is. He starts walking towards where he hears the sound. He gets to a clearing in the wooded area that they're in, and he sees the girl that they found. She's not tied up. She's totally naked. And she is in this field that is snowed over. There's 2 snow mounds beside her. And she's using her arms and sticks and stuff. And she's riding into the snow in between these 2 giant ice mounds. And she's talking to herself and she starts hitting these icicle things and it makes like a bell sound. And she's muttering, she's doing something, and he's just like, hey, what you doing? And she turns around and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And the wind starts coming in, so he goes to grab her because he doesn't want her to get hurt or anything like that. And then he gets annoyed with her, he gets upset. They're all very easily angered, and just their aggression is easily triggered. And he goes to grab her and she doesn't want to, and so he starts like pushing at her, trying to get her to come with him. And he has the shotgun as well, because he thought that would be a good thing to have when he went out to go pee. He's like, if there's something there that, something killed Arv, so I want to make sure that good to go. So he grabbed the shotgun when he went out to pee, and then he starts seeing the snow, and then he starts seeing some weirdness happen with it, and then he starts to freak out because this girl they found out in the cabin doesn't have fingernails, and she also doesn't have fingerprints. Like, her nails are just fully rounded and smooth skin over. There's no fingerprints or nothing, no fingernails, and it freaked him out. And he remembers while he's out here and she's doing this stuff in the snow that he heard a story from a native woman about how spirits and other creatures, they don't have fingernails or fingerprints because the swirls on the fingers make you a human. And if you're not a human, you don't have that. So, like, he starts putting these little connections together. And so he starts getting upset and angry. And he goes to try and, like I said, they're trying to pull each other. He sees the snow being weird and he shoots at it. And then he is killed. Johnny and Ken wake up. They wake up, they realize that the girl isn't there, tied to the trunk. The trunk is still all tied. Like, all the knots are tied that they use to tie her to the trunk. Her bathrobe is there, like, inside the knots. She's not there. And so they get out, they try and figure out what's going on. They go outside, they see where Jimmy went to go pee, and they follow his tracks to the clearing in the field. And Johnny and Ken, they both see this girl covered in blood. And then they see pieces of what Jimmy was. And they start to get really nauseous. They're really upset. They really don't know what's going on. Ken goes to grab the girl because he's like, whatever it is, it could hurt her. I need to save her. So he grabs her and he tries to get her to run. Johnny is trying to figure out what's going on, and he's just like, no. He's like, she has something to do with this. This is partially her fault. They grab her, they get back to the cabin, they're running in there, and then Johnny tells Ken that he needs to hit her. He needs to find out what happened to Jimmy and take some violence for it. And Ken is like, no, I don't want to, but I understand. Yeah, okay. And he's more turned on with her covered in blood than before. So he's just like, I don't know what's going on with me. Something's wrong with me. I'm just, okay, you can hit her a little bit, but just don't like hurt her permanently. And so Johnny starts to slap her around, trying to ask her questions of what happened to Jimmy. And she starts laughing at him and smiling and everything. And none of these hits seem to hurt him or hurt her at all. And he starts getting more angry and starts using more and more of his strength. While Johnny's trying to slap her around and everything, and she's laughing at him, and she looks straight dead at him and tells him, you're next. He starts to freak out and he starts to attack her more vigorously, and he's trying to actually hurt her now instead of just like intimidating her, which he was trying to do before. And Ken attacks him to get him off of her because he's like, you can't hurt her. So Ken attacks him, and then he attacks Ken. Ken ends up getting kind of knocked out. And so then he starts running. And the wind starts pulling up again, and he ends up running towards a shed, and he starts seeing what the snow is showing up as, and he ends up getting killed by the shed. When Ken wakes up, he sees the girl. She's there, and he goes to ask her what's going on, and she's just like, he hit me. And so he hugs her. He pulls her close to him and he hugs her and he smells her and he's like, it's okay. And he registers the smell of her smelling like an animal, like very musky. And so he asks where Johnny went, and she tells him that Johnny went into the trees. And so he's just like, what's going on here? And he goes to check and he sees where Johnny was killed. He sees what's left of Johnny. Johnny was, it looks like the wind came at him so hard that it pushed him against a fence, and then it kept going. So his skin peeled off. And most of the things peeled off except for bits of his clothes, some of his skeleton, and some of the meat parts that were too big to go through the holes in the fence. So he sees that, he kind of just like, okay, this is, I don't know what to do. And he's trying to figure out what to do, but he's like, I can't go anywhere. I can't really do anything. There's no snowmobile. I'm not going to make it to town or anything. He's like, so my best thing to do is to stay here until somebody comes to look for me. So he goes back to the cabin, and the girl is there, and she's just chilling. They're just chilling there. And so he sits by her, and then he puts his arms around her, and he starts getting close to her, and he is super turned on by sitting next to her. So he puts his hand on her thigh, and like checks her reaction. And he's like, oh, she's not pushing my hand away. And then so he moves his hand higher. And he's like, all right, still not pushing my hand away. In fact, she seems into it. And she starts putting her hands on him, and they end up having sex. And right after he falls asleep, he wakes up and he's like, I'm so tired. I'm so weak. I think I'm getting sick. She's there. And every time he wakes up and she's there, they end up having sex, and then he goes back to sleep. So he's losing large amounts of time. And he finally realized it after a while that he's like, something's wrong here. Something's wrong here. And she's more assertive with him. Before, they were like, she's stupid. Something's not, like a screw is loose. Something's not working up here. And so they were like, she's just unreliable. Now she's actually speaking in complete sentences with him, and she seems very assertive and dominant over him, and he's not really eating or anything, and he doesn't know how much time has passed, but he does see the wood pile getting smaller and smaller in the cabin. And so he starts to ask her what's going on, and she's just like, I want you to stay here with me. And the other two guys, they wanted to hurt me, and so he hurt them. As long as you don't hurt me, he won't hurt you too. And Ken is like, what the hell is she talking about? He figures out that she was the person in the photograph. Her and her husband and their child were there. And what had happened was she went out into the snow, into the woods, and there was a entity out there that was made of snow and wind. And this entity takes a bride. And then when the bride dies, the entity waits for a new bride. And this new bride is given kind of like turned more into an entity like him than a human. So that's why she lost her nails, she lost her fingerprints and stuff, because she's not really human anymore. And she was turned into a bride a while before they showed up. And when she was turned into a bride, there's nobody else besides the entity. So she unalived her husband and their child to be with this entity. Then that entity, she does a ritual, she brings him up there, and she's like, he loves her and everything, except she cannot have a baby from him because he's not human. And he protects her. So she wants to keep Ken there to be like her sex slave. That's what she wants, really, is for him to be there to be her sex slave while she is married to this entity. And Ken does not want to be her little sex slave. He's starting to feel weaker. He's more sick now. He's only conscious for a few minutes or so, enough for them to have sex and then he loses the rest of the day. So he's not having fun with this. And he's like, I think I need to figure out what to do. He tells her, okay, this is fine. This is fine. Yeah, I will be with you. I won't hurt you. This is fine. And then one of the times he's conscious, he gets up and he tries to move, and he's moving around and he's trying to get some food. And she's sitting there and she's like, what you doing? And he's just like, oh, I need some food for us, and that's fine. It's going to be okay. Except he's so weak. And he ends up unaliving her, and it takes forever. He unalives her because the sink is full, it's clogged, so it has this like gray liquid in it, like old water that's been just old dishwater that's been there for who knows how long. And so he's trying to attack her and trying to keep her from calling the entity, except he can't stab her or anything like that. And he's so weak, and he ends up like using his body weight and everything and pushing her head down into the water until she drowns. And when she falls off of the sink, it's just on the ground. He's like, all right, I can make it now. I need to run. Except the entity catches him inside the cabin. It blows open the doors and the windows, and it starts getting him and throwing him all around until he is also unalived. After everything calms down, the entity is entering into the cabin, and it's described as you can hear like icicles clinking around as it moves, and all of the wind just completely dies down, so everything just kind of floats and falls to the ground. The entity goes towards the girl who is on the ground, and it describes her like touching her cheek, like she seems just asleep. And then the wind pulls up, and she just gets up like nothing happened, and then just tra-la-la-la-la follows the wind entity out into the ice and the snow. And that's where the book ends. Is it a totes or no? I don't have a rating for this because I just finished it. I just wanted to make a video because I'm really excited about it. But it is definitely a totes. I'm going to say like I'll probably rate it like a 4. This was so good to read. The way that it is described, the way that, especially in a short book, the way that the characters are given enough personality that you can really just be like, I don't like you. I don't like you. But they also have some redeeming qualities that are also put in there. You're like, all right, you're just stupid, and that's why you're doing certain things, but you're okay on a weird level, and you get to really feel for all of these characters. And it's just so good. The entity is not ever named in it. It's not ever really described. The closest that you get to it is Jimmy thinking it's a Wendigo, because of some stories that he heard. It's never confirmed, denied, or anything, but yeah, this girl, the way that she's fully taken over and become feral because she's married to this entity. Oh, it is so good. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys have an amazing day, night, afternoon. Hopefully this video is not too long. I may cut some parts. Don't forget to do all of the YouTube things, like, subscribe, all of that. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye.